Sisters, the Lord is with you.
And also with you.
And this is a reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
There was a certain man named Lazarus who was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus was sick, was the one who anointed the feet of Jesus with perfume and dried his feet with her hair. The two sent this message to Jesus: "The one you love is sick." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This sickness is not to end in death. Rather, it is for the glory of God, so that through it, God's only begotten may be glorified." Jesus loved these three very much. Yet after hearing that Lazarus was sick, he stayed on where he was for 2 more days. Finally, he said to the disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." They protested, "Rabbi, it was only recently that they tried to stone you. Are you going to go back there again?" Jesus replied, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk by day do not stumble, because they see the world bathed in light. Those who go walking by night will stumble, because there is no light in them." Then Jesus said, "Our beloved Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him." The disciples objected, "If he is asleep, he will recover." Jesus had been speaking about Lazarus' death, but they misunderstood him. So he said very plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sakes I am glad that I wasn't there, that you might come to believe. In any event, let us go to him." Then Thomas, the twin, said to the rest, "Let us go along so that we can die with him." When Jesus arrived in Bethany, he found that Lazarus had already been in a tomb for 4 days. Since Bethany was only about 2 miles from Jerusalem, many people had come out to console Martha and Mary. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, while Mary stayed at home. When she got to Jesus, Martha said, "If you had been here, my brother would never have died. Yet even now, I am sure that God will give you whatever you ask." "Your brother will rise again," Jesus assured her. Martha replied, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection, and I am the life. Those who believe in me will live, even if they die, and those who are alive and believe in me will never die." "Do you believe this?" "Yes," Martha replied, "I have come to believe that you are the Messiah, God's only begotten, the one who is to come into the world." When she had said this, Martha went back and called her sister Mary. "The teacher is here asking for you," she whispered. As soon as Mary heard this, she got up and went toward the place outside the village where Jesus was. Those who were there consoling her saw her get up quickly and followed her, thinking she was going to the tomb to mourn. When Mary got to Jesus, she fell to his feet and said, "If you had been here, Lazarus never would have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the other mourners as well, he was troubled in spirit, moved by the deepest emotions. "Where have you laid him?" Jesus asked. "Come and see," they said. As they made their way, Jesus too began to weep. The people in the crowd began to remark, "See how much he loved him." Others said, "He made the blind person see. Why couldn't he have done something to prevent Lazarus' death?" As they approached the tomb, Jesus was again deeply moved. The tomb was a cave with a stone in front of it. "Take away the stone," Jesus directed. Martha said, "It has been 4 days now. By this time there will be a stench." Jesus replied, "Did I not assure you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took the stone away. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and said, Abba, thank you for having heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd, that they might believe that you sent me. Then Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, still bound hand and foot with linen strips, his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus told the crowd, untie him and let him go free. Many of those who had come to console Martha and Mary and had seen Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead put their faith in him. This, my brothers and sisters, is the good news of our salvation.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Father Joe likes to call this tag teaming. I explained back a while the reason why I haven't been actually celebrating Mass is because my knees have been giving me trouble. And I think that I have to go visit the doctor and have him introduce me to Saint Titanium. And have some new knees put in or something. But anyway, but I do take the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. This morning we hear a gospel about daily life. Daily life in the sense that our lives bring us in connection with people. We form relationships. We form bonds with these people. They become family to us. And we see in this very simple story, and if we read the Gospels, we see Jesus visiting these three individuals, Lazarus, Martha, and her sister Mary. We see him interacting, and scholars would tell us, and historians would tell us, that probably when he was in Jerusalem, this is where he stayed. He stayed with his friends. And so this wasn't a passing type of relationship. This was a deep, abiding relationship. This was Jesus' family. And they welcomed him into his home, into their home. And over again, we see how he operates with this core group of people that he has come to know and love. Some people might say that there were relations there was some kind of a blood relation there, but be that as it may, we know that this was where he felt comfortable, where he could rest, where he could relax from his preaching efforts, and so we have this story unfolding. Many happy times were spent in this home. But we know that sometimes we come to the home to find unhappiness, sickness, and death. We come to understand that here Lazarus, the head of the family, has died. And socially, this puts Martha and Mary in a very, very awkward position because of the fact that they have no one to protect them. In Jewish society, a woman did not have any rights. And the rights came through her father, her husband, or her brother. Any male member of that family had the protection of his sisters, his wife, his mother, whomever it may be. And now, these two women are left to the wiles of society. And so now they struggle with the death of their brother, which means the death of the life that they knew. And so this time of mourning was not so much the passing of their brother, but rather what is going to happen now. What is going to happen to us now that Lazarus is dead? As we listen to the story, we hear Jesus making comments to his disciples about Lazarus. And they all knew Lazarus. They all partook of that hospitality that these three offered Jesus and his followers. Jesus says he is sick. But he doesn't make a move to go and visit his friend. He could very easily have gone to Judea, gone to Bethany, and healed him of whatever ill it was that was sapping his strength. But Jesus knew that there was something more involved here. And as he says later on, after he hears that Lazarus has died, he says, "This death will not end in death, but rather that you may believe." And throughout John's gospel, the healing miracles were so that his disciples would come to faith in him. So that when the time came for them to go out and to proclaim the good news, they had these miracles, they had these experiences that they could share with one another. And so finally, Jesus makes it to Bethany. And Martha, the one who was always so concerned about hospitality, the one who Jesus said, "Martha, Martha, you're busy about many things. The only thing you have to be busy about is listening to the words that I speak." She is the one who gets up and goes out and meets him. And she questions him, and rightfully so. "Where were you? Why were you not here?" But John puts it in a very mild way, in making a statement of faith. If you had been here, my brother would never have died. But I'm sure when she met Jesus eye to eye, there was more of an accusatory statement than a statement of faith. "We needed you. Where were you? You were not here." And so Jesus gets involved in now some kind of a dialogue with this woman. A dialogue that is more theological than grief counseling. "Your brother will rise again. I know he will rise again. I'm a Jewish woman. I've been taught these things from my birth. He will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." You're not telling me anything new. But that still doesn't show me why you were not here. And then Jesus opens her heart and her mind to the reality. "Martha, I am the resurrection." Me, Jesus, the one who stands before you, I am the resurrection. I am the life. And if you believe in me, you will never die. Do you believe this? Now, here is a woman who's just lost her brother. She's on the brink of probably finding herself in a social situation that she's never thought possible. And now here is this friend of theirs engaging in a theological debate. "Do you believe that I am the resurrection?" And probably in a moment, the Holy Spirit gave her that ability to say, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the one who's to come into the world." But more importantly, I think Martha began to understand, as what the readers of John's Gospel for the last 2,000 years have come to understand, that resurrection is not an event in the future. It does not take place in a point of time on a calendar date. Resurrection is today. Resurrection is now. We live the resurrection. Jesus rose from the dead at a point in history. But that point in history is now past, but the reality of his powerful work, his redemptive, saving grace, imbues the world to this present moment as a present now. Today is the day of resurrection. Yes, we are going to celebrate Easter in 2 weeks, but today is Resurrection Day. Yesterday was Resurrection Day. Tomorrow will be Resurrection Day. I am the resurrection and the life. And when we talk about heaven, we talk about resurrection. We talk about being raised from who and what we were to what we shall be so that we could live in heaven. And yet Jesus is saying the reign of God is here. The reign of God is here. In this wonderful little book that I came across many years ago by Megan McKenna called The Parables, the Arrows of God, she writes, St. Catherine of Siena says, for those who believe in Jesus, all the way home to heaven is heaven. Heaven is here, now on earth. If we stumble upon this treasure here on earth, if we stumble into this relationship, then we have stumbled into the kingdom of God. Heaven is here and now. It is not a place that we long to go. It is a place that we already exist in. We hear the rest of the story. We hear how Jesus raises this man from the dead, only to die again. We hear him saying, untie him and let him go free. But all this was done so that the disciples and the crowd will come to believe who he is. Megan tells a little story at the end of this chapter. Once upon a time, there was a blacksmith who worked hard at his trade. The day came for him to die. The angel said to him, and much to the angel's surprise, was sent to him, and much to the angel's surprise, he refused to go. He pleaded with the angel to make his case before God, that he was the only blacksmith in the area, and this was the time for his neighbors to begin their planting and sowing. He was much needed, so the angel pleaded his case before God. He said that this man didn't want to appear ungrateful and that he was glad to have a place in the kingdom, but he could he not be put off going for a while, and so he was left. About a year or two later, the angel came back and again with the same message, and the Lord was ready to share with him the fullness of his kingdom. And again, the man has reservations and said, "The kingdom, I'm sorry, my neighbor, the neighbors of mine are." A neighbor of mine is seriously ill, and it's time for the harvest. A number of us are trying to save his crops so that his family won't become desolate. Please, come back later. And off the angel went again. Well, it got to be a pattern. Every time the angel came, the blacksmith had another excuse, and then another. The blacksmith would just shake his head and tell the angel that there was much to be needed and to be done, and declined. Finally, the blacksmith was very old and weary and tired. He decided it was time, and so he prayed, "God, if you would like, please send your angel to me again. I would be glad to come home now." Immediately the angel appeared as if from around the corner of his bed. The blacksmith said, "If you still want me, take me home now. I am ready to live forever in the kingdom of heaven." And the angel laughed and looked at the blacksmith in delight and surprise, and said to him, "Where do you think you have been all these years?" He was home.